I like how he just passingly says, oh, maybe they'll release the evidence by midterm. It's like, I'm trying to make an argument here, but I don't have the evidence for it. But even if he did have the evidence, here's the thing. So this news story about fraud and crime stats is very, very interesting to me. It was first in the New York Post, then covered on Fox Business Today. I'm going to show you that coverage. And tangentially, there's an interesting discussion about cashless bail and the effectiveness and safety of other blue city crime policies. That might be interesting to you. Here's the clip.
I don't know, San Francisco. I believe that it just came out. Go down the line, L.A. What I understand from inside the Trump administration is they've been looking at the police practices in these cities. Now, it would be interesting if they release these stats, and they may for the midterms. In each of these places that are touting double-digit declines, they've also often found rampant evidence of prosecutors not prosecuting felonies, basically busting down felonies for assault. Various forms of burglary, larceny, busting them down to misdemeanors. Thus, you show violent crimes and felonies
they're not happening,
declining dramatically. And if you want an example, I was pointed to the one case of this knife-wielding lunatic, sword-wielding lunatic that stomped on some guy's head in Brooklyn. The guy's name was Nicola Tanzi. He was apparently from everything. He was a model citizen, big in his church.
All right, I do want to talk about the murder of Nicola Tanzi in a second, because I think cashless bail is a very fun thing to talk about. And whether that played a role there, and if cashless bail has some kind of efficacy behind it, or if it's effective. But first, I like how he just passingly says, oh, maybe they'll release the evidence by midterms. It's like, I'm trying to make an argument here, but I don't have the evidence for it. But even if he did have the evidence, here's the thing. His whole argument is that these prosecutors are bussing down these charges, these felony arrests, into misdemeanor convictions. And it's like, that has been the case for basically all of time, all of modern policing. The available stats, and this is really only available for New York City, by the way. It's very hard to find these stats for anywhere else. 93% of felony arrests, nothing happens to them. They don't get a felony conviction. That is very important. So if the Trump DOJ is thinking they're finding anything important by noticing that trend that, not everyone arrested for violent assault gets that charge, or, 50% of them, I believe, across most urban areas get bussed down to a misdemeanor depending on the context. I think that's a very important thing to point out. It's definitely not a big scandal here. There is no deep state. Like they always make it sound like there's a deep state, right? This is discretion we're talking about. It's discretion. So unless you can find me a good example of that discretion not necessarily serving the public interest, then you don't have a very strong argument there. So cashless bail, he brings up Nicola Tanzi. Nicola Tanzi was killed by this guy, this psycho 25-year-old, I think. He was not given cashless bail, at least for his latest arrest, because he assaulted another elderly person. That was apparently his thing. His previous arrests were, I think, legitimate misdemeanors. But his bail was posted at $1,000. He paid it, I think, a few months ago, and he came out and did this, of course. But is the policy of cashless bail? So you can say the judge failed there by not making the bail high enough, right? They made the bail, I think, $1,000 is what the reporting says. But does cashless bail? What's the point of cashless bail? So it's essentially about innocent until proven guilty, really. So on the spectrum of, do we presume guilt if there is a felony arrest, all the way up to we presume innocence until there's a conviction? There's a lot of guilty people who may be released into society between those two ideals or non-ideals, depending on where you're coming from. So we can say, why give anyone bail? If you keep more people in prison, just like post the bail to infinity, more people are in jail. There's gonna be less rearrests. You're gonna have a better criminal justice system. This is the problem. This is the problem with that kind of logic. It's like then you're doing guilty until proven innocent, quite literally. Then, and then the opposite is, of course, you have to presume some amount of guilt. If there is probable cause, then they are more guilty than just any guy walking around on the street. We have to also be responsible enough to acknowledge that. So I think a responsible bail reform policy is probably effective. There's no data that's not confounded by a million different variables that I could find that proves so, right? But on the conservative and liberal side, but all the data is just awful on this stuff. There's evidence saying that people who pay their bail to go out of jail have less recidivism or rearrest than people who get cashless bail, and it's like that's a category error. There's a different kind of person who can afford to get their bail or gets assigned bail in the first place. That's a categorically different person than the cashless bail person who probably is doing a bunch of small crimes instead of bigger crimes. I did also want to talk about Chuck Schumer's genius appearance on the Dr. Mike podcast here, making it crystal clear to as many people as he can, which he has failed at, by the way. Chuck Schumer has failed at making it clear what his demands are. Because I've reiterated it over and over again, but I've had to like scroll through his Twitter feed. I couldn't even find a clear statement there. But his position has always been he just wants the enhanced subsidies. That's a very, very clear distinction to draw because, the main argument coming from the right, even though they won't debate this publicly because they know it's a lie, is that he's demanding just like a complete destruction of the big, beautiful bill and more. And like revitalizing USAID and a bunch of other awful stuff like bringing back NPR and PBS and whatever. He makes it abundantly clear here in this clip what he wants for the first time. Like, he should have done like 20 billion TikToks about this, but he's doing TikToks about very vague things like giving healthcare to Americans when that's less policy oriented. So here's that clip.
More devastating is how the premiums will rise. In other words, we want to just renew the tax credits that have existed for a while on your ACA, your Affordable Care Act, or they used to call it Obamacare.
He should have said that so much clearer over and over again, just to like reason with the American public who may get the misinformation that he's demanding like actually $1.5 trillion in extra spending, like the White House website would have you believe. That is the most important thing here. He also mentions the fact that what I've been mentioning. He's basically saying what I've said on my other videos about this. The most glaring thing, besides the obvious propaganda about this, is that they literally will not negotiate or debate at all. That is how you know that one party is just like completely subverting the interests of the people. Like I just don't know how else to put it. He does go into some pretty interesting topics in this podcast. Dr. Mike makes a point of making him give credit to Trump for a host of things, immigration, which Dr. Mike probably doesn't understand, and the ceasefire in Gaza, which Dr. Mike might not also understand. And Schumer gives pretty good responses. He's like, yes, they're not horrible things, but it's like par for the course, really. Like any legislation that the Democrats would have put forward for the border would have been infinitely better than the draconian shutdown of all immigration law that has happened here, and refugees and foreigners are not better off in this climate, certainly. And the point of good immigration law is not to protect the integrity of the whiteness of the interior. It is to have a moral, like as much as you can make it, a balance between measuring your asylum law versus your feasible capacity and your economic capacity. Like, this is also an economic question that Donald Trump is completely disregarded. But I encourage you to listen to this. Dr. Mike is a good podcaster.